Good afternoon, everyone. Hello and welcome to Sophos presentation. I'm going to talk about future of security and how Sophos deals with it using deep learning and synchronized security portfolio together. So before I talk about security, I'd like to just go through threat landscape. The threat landscape has shifted from a known threat to an unknown threat. As we can, primarily, as we used to see a couple of years back, the traditional viruses that we used to see, which we now call today as a generic malware, which only contributes 12% of overall attack that we see today. Surprisingly, 88% of the attack that we call today as an advanced malware, which have been never seen before. So 54% of the organization, as you can see on the right corner, have been hit with a ransomware attack just in last year. And advanced threats such as, I think everyone is aware of Upadhyay and WannaCry, which were categorized under advanced threats, which also contributes a major portion of the advanced malware. And what industry called today is an exploit, which also contributes the top 4 categories, as you can see on the chart. At Sophos Lab, we roughly receive 500,000 of samples that we receive and process every single day, which has never been seen before. And 75% of the files that we process are malicious files every single day. So what we really need today is we need a predictive security, and the technique that we use at Sophos is a deep learning. I'm going to explain you a bit about the difference between machine learning and deep learning. Deep learning is an extension of machine learning as such. So primarily, machine learning had a method called decision tree. As the name implies, it's a tree structure, which basically you feed in the questions and it gives you an output. So the best example would be your Outlook rules that you create to redirect an email to a specific folder, right? But this particular method is not really scalable, and it cannot compute a complicated task, so to speak. So another version of machine learning is ransom forest, and that overcomes a lot of limitations of decision tree. However, it is quite complex, and it cannot compute the complicated task at the same time. So it takes a lot of time to even to get the output. So what Sophos we have is a deep learning. Deep learning is based on neural networks, which is comparable to a human brain. So it's as if, like, how as a human, how we identify the objects. Like it's a chair or a mobile or a TV or sort of. So similarly, the neural networks is based on how the human basically behaves or identifies the objects. The same way deep learning identifies the process, the malicious files, and so on and so forth. Hence, deep learning is much faster and quite scalable as such. So you can feed in infinite amount of data to the deep learning for processing. There is no as such a limitation in the algorithm. So what Sophos next-gen endpoint has in deep learning, essentially it is based on neural networks, as I mentioned. It detects known and unknown threats without signatures, so you don't need to have a traditional anti-malware antivirus solution as such. And it's extremely fast. It typically takes less than 20 milliseconds to process and to give you an output. It doesn't really require an internet connection. It works out of the box, so no real need of having a training in the customer environment. It's very reliable, having the lowest rate of false positive. It has Sophos being a player since last 30 years and is having a lot of experience in IT industry. And the deep learning model is fitted with, it has an adaptive of a big data, and like the model is trained with 100 million of samples. So it's not just we speak about, there are third-party analysts as well. They rate Sophos right on the top. Talking about synchronized security. Synchronized security, as in, I'll just like to give you an example so that you can relate the technology that I'm going to talk about. So imagine you have a security guard at the main entrance, you have a security guard within the premises, but they do not have a communication device to talk with each other. So how disaster it would be if something bad happens outside, it stays outside, and something bad happens inside, it stays inside, because they cannot communicate with each other. So Sophos essentially has come up with a synchronized security where the two security components, they share the security intelligence between them to provide you an overall security. So this particular synchronized security takes overall security to a next level. So synchronized security is essentially linking the network firewall and the endpoint together to provide you unparalleled protection. So this is just an example. You have a security guard at the main gate, which you can call it as a firewall. You have a security guard inside the premises, which is your endpoints, your workstation, or the server. And they communicate using a communication device as such. So you can replace the endpoint as a next-gen endpoint solution, and the main security guard at the main entrance as a firewall. That overall provides you an acceleration to the threat intelligence. It provides you active source identification and automatic incident response. Now, on the left, you can see these are the products that we have at Sophos, which is the network level products. We have next-gen firewall, we have web appliance, we have email appliance, we have secure Wi-Fi. On the right, you will see the endpoint products that we have is next-gen endpoint. We have server protection, we have encryption, we have mobile security as well. So all in all these are the best of breed products. They work great on their own, but they work even better when they communicate with each other. I'm going to show you a couple of slides later on, just to give you a scenario about how the product talks with each other and how it can really benefit to you. So this is a core feature of next-gen firewall. The upper half is kind of a pre-execution, how we determine the malicious traffic before it really tries to execute inside the endpoint or inside your network. So deep learning, although it takes a tiny place in the chart, but it plays a major role, and which is further shielded with your network protection, having different features like sandboxing, and you have a web application firewall and advanced threat protections, and so on and so forth. So synchronized security essentially consists of 3 products. Starting from right, we have a next-gen firewall, we have next-gen endpoint, and a next-gen encryption. I'm going to talk about each of them. So Sophos XG Firewall is a one-stop solution. It has a lot of features within a single appliance, and it is quite simple to manage. It has on-box reporting, so you don't have to have an external reporting solution, and you don't have to manage additional server to get the reports. The reports are available within the appliance to provide you an instant visibility about what's happening inside your network, what type of applications the users are accessing, what type of websites the users are browsing, and so. It provides you a complete protection in a way while having IPS, you have a WAF, web application firewall, you have sandboxing, you have advanced threat protection together, and synchronized security, which I'm going to talk in a while. And last but not the least, we have a central management platform wherein you can manage all the firewalls from a single console. So Sophos Intercept X is a product which essentially deals with ransomware. So we use a technique called a cryptoguard, which detects the behavior of the application, which really doesn't require any signature. And as I said, it uses a deep learning technique to identify. So it doesn't really need any signature to identify the attack. It also comes with an anti-hacker, which detects the exploits, and it also has a credential theft protection, which, for instance, if there is a genuine process, and if there is an attacker who is trying to steal the credential from that particular process, so to speak. So you have a credential theft protection which will really help you to prevent any damage that it may cause otherwise. And it provides you an extended cleanup, which means that it will restore all the files which were been infected. For an instance, if it was a ransomware attack, we take a shadow copy of the file before being encrypted. So while the malicious code or the payload is trying to encrypt a couple of files, that's when we kick in and we identify that this is an attack, and we restore all your files back to the original state. In addition to that, you have a root cause analysis. Now, this is really very unique. Root cause analysis basically will tell you that what has happened. This is very important post analysis. Like, you want to know what happened inside your network, how did it happen, and what you can do in the future to prevent this stuff. And this is in addition to a traditional endpoint protection. Like traditional endpoint protection, it has anti-malware, then it has device control and native firewall, and so on and so forth. So this particular product is basically designed for anti-ransomware technique, for anti-exploit, for root cause analysis. Sophos also provides a data protection, which is known as a safeguard, which provides you an encryption of your cloud storage. So if you are using a Dropbox or a Google Drive or something, before you upload your data, the data would be encrypted. You can also encrypt the entire disk. You can also encrypt your network shares as well. So this is very essential while we are seeing GDPR around the corner, where you really need to encrypt your data as such. It also provides you a mobile encryption. So if you are having a roaming users who are heavily using mobile for communicating, or sort of for email exchange and sort of. So how does synchronized security works as such? So this is just a given scenario. You have a computer which is protected with Sophos endpoint, and you have a lock sign which tells you that that's a data protection product, and that's the firewall. So assume that everything is clean at the moment. The computer will send a green signal to the firewall. So the endpoint continuously communicates with the firewall using a security heartbeat. So if at all the endpoint detects, Sophos endpoint detects that there is some malicious activity on the computer, it will first inform the data protection product to revoke the keys. So when it revokes the keys, the user himself or a malicious process who is trying to read your data or trying to upload the data to some other place, he will not be able to. So to speak, because the data is all encrypted. So even if it is uploaded, they cannot read it. And the endpoint doesn't stop there. It also talks back to the firewall, asking the firewall to isolate this endpoint, which means that this endpoint cannot communicate to your servers, which will overall help you to minimize the damage inside your network. So here the endpoint takes the lead here to communicate to your data protection and to the firewall. You do not essentially need encryption product together. Synchronized security can also work between the endpoint and the firewall, right? You don't need the data protection for synchronized security. Another example would be where you have, this is the other way around, where the firewall will inform the endpoint. So if the endpoint is trying to browse something which is hitting to a bad website, let's say it is a command and control server. So here the firewall will identify that it's hitting to some bad website. The firewall will intimate back using a security heartbeat to the endpoint, saying that you killed the process. And at the same time, firewall will put that computer in a quarantine list, so that the computer cannot access the internet, cannot access the other networks. So your servers and your other networks are safe. And it also does an automatic incident response. So as I said, like, it will block the communication to the internet and to the server. It will restore it back once it uses an extended clean. So the computer is cleaned automatically, and it will restore all the communication, all the privileges that the endpoint had previously. Okay, so traditionally what you do at the moment is, when you have a product A at the endpoint and you have a product B at the gateway, which they do not talk with each other. So if your machine is infected by by the time your endpoint detects it, it has already done the damage on your server or on different parts of your network. Secondly, you have to, stay alert on the console, in front of the console. If something goes wrong, you have to, stay in front of the console. You look at the alert, and then you physically go and disconnect the computer from the network so to, minimize your damage. But with Sophos, synchronized security, you don't have to physically stay in front of the console. The detection and the incident response, everything is done automated. And here in this, the endpoint, once the firewall informs back to the endpoint doesn't stop there. It goes back to the encryption product, data protection product, asking to revoke the keys. So as soon as it revokes the keys, the machine will no longer have any access to the files or sort of. Okay. Further, you have server protection. It works in the same fashion. Like if the client, let's assume that you have a file server and the clients are accessing the file server, which is in a different network. If this client, if the server is compromised, then Sophos server protection will send an alert back to the firewall, and firewall will isolate the computer, isolate the server from the network, and these clients will no longer be able to access the server. So here the scenario is the other way around, where your clients are clean and the destination is infected. Synchronized app control is something where in a present firewall, as you have a lot of applications which which goes unknown through your firewall. Like let's say you are using an application which no one else in the world is using it, or you are having an application which are very dynamic in nature. So with Sophos, using synchronized security, we can dynamically classify the application. We can dynamically recognize the application traffic. How do we do it? So when we receive, as in a firewall receives the traffic from the endpoint, if firewall is not able to classify, it will go back to the endpoint asking which particular application is generating that traffic. So the endpoint, using a security heartbeat, will inform the firewall that this is the application which it is using, and it will provide you a probable classification of that application. So it could be your business application, it could be unwanted application, or it could be an application which is trying to leak out your data. So as an administrator, you have a privilege to throttle the bandwidth for your business application. You can reduce the bandwidth for unwanted application. And this is all done on the fly. So application recognition is done on the fly. So these are the top 3 benefits of overall synchronized security. It provides you unparalleled protection. It has automatic incident response and real site and control. And Sophos is a leader, is a market leader in the firewall, in the endpoint, as well as in the encryption product. If you take Gartner report or NSS or a Foster report, any report that you choose, you will find Sophos right on the top. So some of the free tools that are available for you, just in case if you like to, these are mostly for the home users. I'm not gonna just talk, you can just go through that. And if at all, we have a booth, we have a distributor, NSS, in here. If at all you need some more information, I'll be happy to help you there. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you.